What kind of man murders his own mother? Not in a fit of rage, not in the chaos of a sudden quarrel, but with deliberate calculation, with poisoned plates, collapsing ceilings, and even a boat rigged to sink. This is the story of Nero, the emperor who owed everything to his mother, Agrippina, and yet repaid her loyalty with a betrayal so cold, so theatrical, that it would echo through history. Stay with me until the end. Because to truly understand why Nero turned against the woman who made him emperor, you have to follow the twisted path of power, fear, and betrayal that led to her final words. Strike my womb. But before the betrayal, before the murder that would forever stain Nero's name, there was Agrippina the Younger. She was no ordinary Roman woman. She was the daughter of Germanicus, Rome's golden boy general, whose tragic death left the people yearning for what might have been. She was the sister of Caligula, the infamous mad emperor, whose cruelty had turned the empire into a carnival of blood and fear. And she was the mother of Nero, the boy who would one day set Rome aflame, not with fire alone, but with treachery. Rome had seen ambitious women before, but Agrippina was different. She was brilliant, calculating, and relentless. Where other women used charm or beauty as weapons, Agrippina wielded bloodlines and strategy. She understood that in Rome, power flowed not just from armies and senators, but from dynasties. And she was determined to carve her family's name into history with a chisel of iron. When her brother Caligula was assassinated, Agrippina found herself exiled, cast into the shadows. For many, exile was a slow death, but not for her. She returned with the cold resolve of someone who had looked ruin in the eye and refused to bow. She would not merely survive, she would rule. Her moment came with Emperor Claudius, a man mocked for his limp and his stammer, yet seated upon the greatest throne on earth. Agrippina saw what others did not, an opportunity. Through cunning persuasion and perhaps whispers of poison, she convinced him to adopt her son Nero as heir. By doing so, she eclipsed his own son, Britannicus, and rewrote the future of Rome. But Agrippina was not content with merely being empress. She positioned herself as Claudius's partner in rule. For the first time in Roman history, coins were struck showing a woman's face equal in size to the emperor's. Imagine the shock across the empire, an empress displayed not behind, not below, but beside her husband. Agrippina wasn't just a mother. She was a kingmaker. She had birthed not simply a boy, but a dynasty she intended to control. And yet, in that very ambition lay the seed of her downfall. Because what happens when the child you raise to rule begins to believe that the empire belongs to him alone, free from the hand that gave it to him? When Claudius died, some whispered by poison slipped into his mushrooms at Agrippina's command, Nero ascended the throne at just 16. Picture it. The marble halls of the palace, the Senate in their white togas, the Praetorian Guard at attention. And beside Nero, not in the shadows, but openly at his side, was Agrippina. In the early years, Rome thought it had two rulers, the boy emperor and the iron-willed mother who guided him. Agrippina received foreign ambassadors, signed documents, even sat beside her son during audiences. But power shared is power resented. Nero, young, impressionable, and hungry for freedom, began to feel smothered. The crown weighed heavy, but not nearly as heavy as his mother's shadow. And when another woman entered his life, Poppaea Sabina, the rift between mother and son deepened. Agrippina would not share control. Nero would not tolerate defiance. Something had to give. Nero was no longer the wide-eyed boy emperor who once clung to his mother's guiding hand. As the years passed, he grew bold. He wanted independence, not maternal oversight. He wanted Rome to see him as a godlike ruler, not as the puppet of a woman, no matter how powerful that woman was. But Agrippina would not loosen her grip. She criticized his love affairs, dismissing his passions as reckless indulgence. She warned him against his new advisors, men she saw as parasites eager to twist Nero for their own gain. And when her words did not sway him, she resorted to the most cutting reminder of all, that without her, he was nothing. She had built his throne, and she could unmake it. The palace began to feel less like a home and more like a battlefield of whispers. Every marble corridor carried the tension of divided loyalties. Some in the court sided with Agrippina, fearing that without her discipline, Nero would spiral into chaos. Others, especially his young courtiers, urged Nero to cut ties, to free himself from what they painted as a suffocating maternal tyranny. And then came Poppaea Sabina. Beautiful, ambitious, and cunning, she became Nero's obsession. But Poppaea was more than a lover. She was a catalyst. She saw Agrippina for what she was, the single greatest obstacle to her own ascent. And so, she allegedly whispered an ultimatum into Nero's ear, one that dripped with venom and inevitability. You will never be free or truly mine while your mother lives. For Nero, it was both a temptation and a curse. He longed to be free, to break from Agrippina's shadow, to prove himself as Rome's true emperor. But how do you kill the woman who gave you the throne? How do you silence the mother who gave you life itself? You try, and you fail. The gods must have laughed at his first attempts, poisons that never worked, plots that fell apart. Each failure only made the rift wider, the tension thicker, and the inevitability of the coming storm more certain. The mother who had once been his protector now stood as his greatest enemy. And so the boy who had risen because of her would now plot against her, with a cruelty that would shock the empire. And this is where I'll pause for a moment, because if you've been captivated by this story of betrayal and blood, then you'll want to hear the rest. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, because not only does it help us bring you more dark stories from history, but it also ensures you won't miss what happens next in Nero's twisted reign. Now, back to our story. When the rift between mother and son could no longer be mended, Nero resolved to do the unthinkable. He would kill the very woman who had given him the throne. The first attempt was simple, almost crude by Roman standards: poison. Agrippina, however, was not naive. She had grown up in a world where poison was as common a tool as the dagger. She tested her meals, kept antidotes on hand, and studied every cup of wine with suspicion. When Nero's venom failed to take hold, it was not just survival, it was defiance. A silent message to her son: I know what you are doing, and you cannot touch me. So Nero escalated. The second attempt was stranger, almost absurd. A ceiling rigged to collapse upon her as she lay in bed. Yet the trap misfired. Perhaps poor craftsmanship spared her, or perhaps it was fate itself mocking Nero's desperation. The plan was so clumsy, so theatrical, that whispers spread through the palace. Agrippina was still alive. The emperor's own mother had outlived death twice, and each time the gods seemed to shield her. But Nero was not finished. If poison and collapsing ceilings failed, he would turn the stage into the sea. His most elaborate plot yet took shape, a pleasure barge designed to betray its passengers. On a calm evening, under the silver light of the moon, Agrippina was invited to join her son's lavish entertainment. The sea was calm, the wine rich, the company pleasant. Agrippina reclined, listening to the rhythmic crash of the waves against the hull. Then the crack, timbers snapping, screams tearing through the night air. The boat had been built to betray her. Panels collapsed, weighted beams fell, and water poured in with merciless speed. Guests splashed into the dark sea, their cries swallowed by the vast silence of the bay. It should have been the perfect murder. A tragic accident, the emperor's mother drowned at sea, but Agrippina did not drown. With a strength born of fury, she swam through the night waters. Her body bruised, her garments soaked, she dragged herself ashore. Alive, defiant, and now she knew. She knew with chilling certainty that her son had become her would-be executioner. And Nero knew with equal dread that his mother had survived. What happens when a betrayal has already been attempted but not yet completed? When both predator and prey are bound by blood and locked in a game where only one can survive. Nero could not allow her survival. The humiliation, the fear, it consumed him. So he abandoned theatrics for brutality. One night, soldiers stormed Agrippina's villa at Baiae. The torches cast wild shadows on the marble walls as the men forced their way inside. Agrippina, regal even in terror, is said to have bared her chest and cried, "Strike my womb, the womb that bore Nero." The soldiers obeyed. Steel met flesh. The woman who had built an emperor was cut down by the empire she had helped shape. And Nero, her son, waited for word. When the news came, his mother was dead, he did not weep, he celebrated. But Rome whispered. The people had seen emperors kill rivals, generals, even wives. But a mother? that crossed into something darker, something monstrous. Agrippina's death left a stain Nero could never wash away. The empire's official story was carefully staged. Nero proclaimed that his mother had been plotting against him, conspiring to overthrow her own son. He paraded this justification like a mask, hoping the Senate and the people of Rome would accept it as truth. He ordered public ceremonies, claimed divine approval, and even declared that Rome should rejoice at being freed from her tyranny. But behind the grand speeches and polished marble facades, the truth seeped out. People whispered in the taverns, in the marketplaces, in the shadows of temples. They asked each other in hushed voices, if he could kill his mother, what would he not do? It was not just a murder. It was a line crossed, a taboo so unthinkable that it shattered the fragile image of imperial dignity. Romans had seen emperors slaughter rivals, generals, even wives. But matricide was something darker. It cut at the very fabric of Roman morality. To kill one's mother was to violate not just family, but the sacred order of nature itself. And from that moment on, Nero seemed to embrace the role of the monster they whispered about. His paranoia grew like a shadow swallowing the light. He struck at senators who questioned him, at friends who hesitated in their loyalty, at lovers who failed to soothe his insecurities. His excesses multiplied. Lavish feasts, theatrical performances where he played not just emperor, but actor, musician, even god. Then came the Great Fire of Rome. Flames consumed the city for 9 days, and though the truth remains debated, many believed Nero had ordered it. His enemies whispered that the man who murdered his mother had now murdered his city. In the wake of the fire came new horrors, the brutal persecution of Christians, scapegoated to cover suspicion. Executions by fire, by beasts, by crucifixion became public spectacles. And still, the shadow of Agrippina's ghost seemed to follow him. Her death was the turning point. The moment the boy who had once been crowned emperor revealed himself as something else entirely. By betraying the woman who had birthed him, raised him, and crowned him, Nero had not only severed his bloodline, he had betrayed Rome itself. And Rome would never forgive him. Nero's name is forever remembered as a symbol of tyranny and madness. But perhaps nothing defines him more than this single act, the cold-blooded killing of his own mother. Because if Rome was built on family, tradition, and duty, then Nero shattered all of it with a single command. And so her words echo still across centuries of history. Strike my womb. The wound she pointed to was not just her body, it was Rome itself, cut open by the son she had given to it. So the next time you hear the name Nero, remember this. Behind the flames of Rome, behind the decadence and cruelty, lies a single betrayal that made everything else possible. If you found this story gripping, don't stop here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you never miss another tale of mystery, murder, and betrayal in history. And when you're done, click on the next video you see on screen. We've got another scandalous chapter from the past waiting for you. Because history is never as far away as it seems.